Hello again and welcome to the second video in the series allowing you to eventually decide for yourself if prions are friends or foes. Today we'll look at why prions might be considered foes. We'll also be looking at how exactly prions are transmissible and how a person acquires a disease associated with prions. So, in the simplest terms, prions are considered foes because of their close association with many diseases. The group of diseases directly caused by the disease version of a prion protein, as we discussed in the last video, are called transmissible spongiform encephalopathies. Now, that's a bit of a mouthful, so luckily enough they are also known as prion diseases. Prion diseases, in a general sense, cause a deterioration of mental and physical abilities because of the aggregates caused by prions, as shown here. If you were to look at a brain tissue infected by a prion disease, tiny holes are present. This is where it gets the name spongiform. There are a wide range of diseases that are caused directly by prions. I won't name every single one for your sanity and for mine, yet to name a few, Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, also known as CJD, is the most prevalent prion disease, making up 80% of all prion diseases and directly affects humans. It was first recognized in the 1920s. It is particularly problematic because 90% of the time it is unknown how a person actually gained the disease. The brain shrinks and is generally characterized by depression, followed dementia, and death within 12 months. Bovine spongiform encephalopathy is the sciencey name for mad cow disease. It is known to have caused the deaths of 177 people so far in the UK and is acquired through the ingestion of contaminated meat. If humans were to eat this contaminated meat, they'd be infected in the form of a Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease called variant Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, or shortened to VCJD. It is important to remember that the 177 deaths I talked about earlier are not caused directly by the mad cow disease. It is actually the variant Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease that is causing the deaths. Interestingly, humans have unknowingly seen prion diseases as early as the 18th century. Spanish shepherds in 1732 wrote about their sheep going up to fences and scraping themselves against it, causing much damage to the sheep. We now know it was because of a disease called scrapie, a prion disease that caused a very strong sensation of itching. Another interesting example of a prion disease affecting humans is kuru. In the 1950s, it was found that tribes in Papua New Guinea were, as part of a ritual, eating dead human brain matter. They thought that knowledge from past lives were being passed on. Well, whilst we cannot be sure about that, we know that they were passing on a disease called kuru. The disease was characterized by the causation of violent tremors in the humans. It would also cause periods of laughter, which is why they also called it laughing sickness. Generally, after infection, death would occur within 12 months. So, it's very easy to see why one might look at the diseases prions cause and make the assumption that prions are foes. However, it is important to consider the incidence of these diseases. CJD, accounting for 80% of all prion diseases, only affects 1 in 1 million people. It is very rare, and therefore, could prions really be considered foes? Yet, this idea can be challenged by the association prions have with neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's, Huntington's, and Parkinson's. Experts have measured that 1 in 10,000 people have Huntington's, and around 127,000 people have Parkinson's in the UK alone. Alzheimer's, though, is the scariest. In the USA, it is estimated that every 66 seconds someone develops Alzheimer's, and in the next 40 years, 80 million new cases are expected.
Yet, prions are not the direct cause of these diseases. The link comes because the disorders infect in a prion-like fashion. Using Alzheimer's as an example, it is caused by beta amyloid. As we said in the previous video, amyloid are proteins that aggregate and cause disease. Alzheimer's is caused by a misfold in the protein causing beta amyloid, before aggregation and spread around the brain. This stops the brain from working properly by impairing cognitive function. This is exactly what prion diseases do. Whilst not caused by prion proteins, an undeniable link is demonstrated. In fact, work by scientists has even shown taking brain tissue from a mouse with Alzheimer's and inoculating it into a healthy mouse would see Alzheimer's develop rapidly in this previously healthy mouse. Some do ask if that really is surprising, though it does suggest Alzheimer's may be transmissible. Now, I'm not trying to scare anyone. I'm not saying for a second that Alzheimer's is contagious. However, it does show an undeniable link, as I've said, to prions and prion diseases. This is why there is such an association. It is also important to understand how these prions are transmissible. So, how does an organism acquire a prion disease? There are 3 ways. Firstly, they can be acquired through ingestion, such as mad cow disease or kuru. When contaminated meat is ingested, it starts in the lymphoid tissue. It uses the immune system cells, such as macrophages, for transport to the peripheral nervous system, before ascent to the central nervous system using the spinal cord. It can also be spontaneously acquired. 85 to 90% of prion diseases are spontaneous. It is actually currently unknown how the diseases are developed. Hypotheses are currently in exposure to certain viruses or simply a random mutation of a prion protein. Sporadic CJD generally presents between the ages of 50 to 70 as dementia before rapidly worsening.
The final way prion diseases can be acquired is through genetics. 5 to 10% of cases are familial. Fatal familial insomnia and familial CDD are examples. It is caused by an autosomal dominant mutation of a prion protein gene.
So we've talked about prion diseases and how they aggregate and spread around the brain. But how exactly do they go about this spread? There are more than one theories. However, not to confuse, we'll discuss the most accepted theory, the seeding model. I know, it's a daunting sight, but not so bad when you know what's going on. PRP simply stands for prion protein, and the grey cube with the small c above it represents a prion protein in a healthy, functional state. On the other hand, the red prism with the small sc, which stands for scrapie, is the disease-causing state of that prion protein. The arrows going both ways show that they are in equilibrium, which means both are being made at the same time. Now usually the healthy state is much more favoured, which means a lot more of it is being made. However, if a person acquires the disease spontaneously through ingestion of contaminated meat or even because of a hereditary condition, the disease-causing protein becomes much more favoured as shown in the diagram. Once it becomes more favoured, it is in a position to cause aggregation. It starts off very slowly in the recruitment phase where more subunits collect, before an amyloid is formed. Each individual prion protein is then capable of converting previously healthy proteins, and thus the speed of aggregation greatly increases. This explains why prion diseases generally occur in later life, as the early formation is so slow. The rapid increase in speed of aggregation after the initial stages explains why death usually occurs within 12 months.
Well, that's about all you really need to know about that. And again, I'm aware there's a lot of information to process, so to try and break it down for you, here is a summary. Prions have a very close association with diseases. As we said, they cause transmissible spongiform encephalopathies or prion diseases, such as mad cow disease and Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, characterized by the causation of dementia. Although, as we discussed, because of how rare the diseases actually are, could they really be considered enemies? When one considers the link with neurodegenerative diseases and how much more common these diseases are, suddenly it becomes more realistic to think of prions as a foe. As we said, there are 3 ways to get prion diseases. One way could be acquisition through ingestion of contaminated meat, another way could be spontaneous, or simply it could be genetic. We also talked about how a prion propagates and spreads around the brain, looking at the seeding model. Congratulations, you've made it through the second video in this series. Now you're a step closer to deciding for yourself if prions are foes or friends. Do remember there is another side to the story and stick around for the last chapter in the series discussing how prions can be seen as friends.